Welcome to Republican Roundtable. I'm your host, Max Reimer. As many of you will recall, we have had a recent budget that was released by our Governor, Tim Walz. One of the big issues of concern in that budget was the transportation budget and the taxation that's going to happen around that. In studio today, we have a friend of the show, the Transportation Tsar, Frank Pafko. Frank, thanks for joining us.
Well, thank you for inviting me, Max.
You know, the funny thing about you in this show is you were my first Republican Roundtable interview.
I remember that. We were in the field.
Yes. West 7th.
And the Riverview Corridor,
that's right,
which is still in the news.
Yes. Crazy. They want to put a trolley car there.
They
still
want a modern streetcar.
Oh, yes.
And it will, $2 billion.
Is that different? Is that different than a trolley car?
A little sleek. It's a sleek trolley car.
Got it.
Yeah.
Got it. Okay. Different exterior.
Different exterior, looks more modern. But
okay,
yeah, it's still a trolley car. It rides in mixed traffic, so they will be sharing the lane with cars and trucks.
Taking off a lane, right?
No, they just occupy an existing lane on West
okay.
7th. It is not on a separate right-of-way like light rail transit.
Okay.
And the Ramsey County is proposing to spend $2 billion to get to the Mall of America, the airport in the Mall of America, a little slower than the current express bus.
Okay. Yikes.
Yeah.
We spent a ton of money at one point in time tearing up those trolley cars, if I remember correctly.
That is correct, when they went to buses. And in many cases, the rails in Minneapolis are underneath asphalt.
Okay. Well, like I mentioned before, we had these budget proposals come out.
A couple of weeks ago, yes.
What should we be, from a transportation standpoint? I know we're going to get into specifically the gas tax and a couple of other issues surrounding how that impacts you and me on a daily basis. But what are your feelings in general about this budget proposal?
Okay, one thing that I think both the Republicans and the Democrats can agree on, and Governor Walz, is that road and bridge funding is not keeping up with the demand. It is barely keeping up with the maintenance requirements, just keeping the existing system maintained. It is not keeping up with safety and capacity improvements. 2 years ago, the Republican-controlled legislature decided to take existing sales taxes that were going to the general fund, sales taxes on auto repair parts, leased vehicles, rental vehicles, and move that from the general fund into the Highway User Trust Fund. That somewhere to the tune of $400 to $460 million a biennium.
Okay.
It's still not keeping up, and there would be interest with a surplus in transferring more. Governor Walz, however, has proposed to increase the traditional sources of money to the Highway User Trust Fund, the gas tax, the tab fees, and the motor vehicle sales tax, and take away the sales tax on motor vehicle parts and rental leased vehicles. Take that away and give it back to the general fund so he can fund some of his other priorities.
Okay.
So what's real interesting in his proposal, he talks about that over the next 10 years, there's probably a $6 billion shortfall in what we would like to spend on roads and bridges and what the revenue's coming in. So the first thing he does as of July 1st is to take away $460 million a biennium, somewhere to the tune of, over the next 10 years, between $2 and $2.5 billion. He makes a $6 billion problem an $8.5 billion problem.
Right.
Then, starting in September of the 3 months into the 2-3 months into the biennium, he will then start increasing other taxes. He's proposing a 20-cent gas tax increase over 2 years to be implemented a nickel September and April of each year, 5 cents at a time. His takeaway, however, is equivalent. Margaret Anderson Kelleher says about 7 cents. I say about 8 cents. That's a rounding error. But gasoline sales, as we buy new cars, we get better. Typically, we get better mileage, so we can and the amount of lane miles that or the vehicle miles traveled has been remaining fairly constant, starting to kick up here the last couple of years. But gasoline sales are projected to be flat, not increasing.
Yes.
On the other hand, inflation will constantly kick up the sales tax on auto repairs and lease
There's a multiplier
vehicles.
almost.
Yeah, it will continue to increase, whereas the gas tax will not. So the first thing he does is take away 8 cents. He takes away 8 cents worth of gas tax. He replaces it in September with 5 cents. He doesn't kick in another 5 cents until April.
Sure.
There are some other taxes he's going to be kicking in. He is going to be increasing the sales tax on automobiles from its current 6.5 to 6.875, and essentially 3/8 of a cent.
Sure.
We know that because of the constitutional amendment back in 2008, that is split 60%, or I should say no more than 60% to roads and no less than 40% to transit. It is currently at that 60-40 split. However,
something tells me that's gonna change.
I don't think they're going to propose that this year.
Okay.
But he's putting a lot of money into roads and bridges, not that much money into transit. I think in future years of Walz administrations, and you're going to see that 60-40 split. It can be in accordance with the Constitution and be 100% to transit and 0% to roads. I think we're going to see that effort, maybe not all the way, but we're going to see that ratio, attempts to make that ratio change. But he's also going to increase he's proposing on January 1st to increase your license tab fees.
Yes.
Currently, let's say you buy a new vehicle, your license tab, your registration fee is calculated as 1.25% of the value of the car.
Yes.
He's going to be increasing that to 1.5%, essentially a 20% increase.
Pretty significant increase.
He is going to change the depreciation schedule, so you're going to pay that higher fee longer.
Okay.
And for those of us who drive old cars that have been fully depreciated, he's going to up anywhere from $10 to $45 your base fee. I currently pay $35 for my base fee. So we're going to be paying a lot more in registration fees. We're going to be paying more in sales tax. We're going to be paying more in gas tax. The existing gas tax, federally, it's 18.5 cents a gallon. The state is 28.5. Governor Walz is proposing over the next 2 years 20 cents, raising that to 48.5. And what hasn't been getting much attention in this is that after those 2 years, he is proposing to index the gasoline tax to the cost of inflation. And they're projecting that will raise another 29 cents over the next 10 years.
So you are talking about almost 70 cents.
76.5, I believe, is the gas tax that we would have projected by 2030.
You're almost touching another $1.
Oh, when you kick in the federal tax, you're just about $1.
Yeah, that's incredible.
Yeah,
it's incredible. So we're talking a lot abstractly, almost in percentages and parts of cents and that kind of thing. Help me illustrate how ridiculous this is for normal people. It seems crazy.
It is. Well, first off, we currently pay. Well, let's take that back. A few months ago, we were paying slightly over $2 a gallon, with 28.5 cents state, 18.5 federal, almost a quarter of that. Say it was about a little over $1.50 for the retail price, wholesale price of gas, retail price of gas, and another 46 cents or whatever, 47 cents of tax. So it was maybe 55 or what should I say, 25, 75, 25, roughly in there. If that would have been $1 instead of 50 cents, that would have been doubled. You'd automatically been kicking another 55 cents on top of it. But have you noticed an interesting observation over the last couple of weeks? We had been in the Twin Cities in the state of Minnesota. We've been plugging around, paying somewhere around, 209, 210, maybe up to 220 a gallon of gas. And it seemed like the day after Governor Walz announced a 20-cent gas tax, all of a sudden we're paying 230, 240. It's almost like we got hit by the 20-cent gas tax immediately.
Right.
And now I'm coming over here and it's 245 in some stations.
Right.
So,
and what's really sad about that is it feels that way, but we haven't felt the full force of that gas tax
No,
yet.
gas tax, if passed, wouldn't kick in until next September.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible. You had mentioned the fee schedule, or the increase in the tax
in the
gas
tax,
tax.
your registration fee.
Yeah, not the registration fees, but the gas tax increase being incremental.
Will be incremental. They're going to, after the first biennium, for thence on, they will tie that to the cost of living. So you're now sitting at basically almost a 50-cent state gas tax. We'll just use that. If the cost of living goes up 2%, which it almost always does even when it's not, that's a penny. If it goes up 4 cents, that's 2 cents. And it will continue to increase. And then they will take the cost of living on 54 cents, and then they will take the cost of living on 60 cents, and it will just continually go up. But what's very interesting is Governor Walz has, I think rightly, said that roads and bridges need more money.
Of course.
But he has also come up with his version of the Green New Deal, and he wants to get rid of fossil fuels. So he wants to get rid of gasoline in the state of Minnesota. So while he is increasing the cost, allegedly to help roads and bridges, he is going to get rid of gasoline-powered the internal combustion engine, which means the main source of funding for roads and bridges will go away.
And you outlined where the funding is coming from, specifically taking away from that specified earmarked piece of the sales tax and moving it towards, obviously, gas tax to backfill that. But the sick thing about all of this is we're still running a surplus in this state in the general fund.
Yeah. It's almost like...
Is it purely ideological, or is there something...
No, this is purely ideological. It was opposed 2 years ago. That shift in transportation funding was opposed by the DFL, saying you're taking it away from schools, or you're taking it away from health care, or you're taking it away from welfare. You're taking it away from what it's supposed to be funding. It is, however, a transportation-related tax. And rightly, we should be reducing our dependence upon the gas tax. We should be implementing some other taxes to maintain the roads and bridges. I maintain that we're supposed to be going to more electric vehicles.
Yeah.
And you have to charge them, and it's put on your XL bill.
Yes.
You get a sales tax on your XL bill. By the Constitution, any excise tax on any means of production of a vehicle on a public road has to go to the Highway User Trust Fund. So why is not the sales tax on the electricity used to power electric vehicles not going to the Highway User Trust Fund?
Something tells me Xcel Energy probably has a pretty powerful seat at that table.
No, it doesn't make a difference. Xcel has to charge the same thing. They don't want to raid the general. That is currently going to the general fund unconstitutionally. Another example of that is the corner gas station. The gas stations have had leaking underground storage tanks, and for the last more than 30 years, the Pollution Control Agency has run a program called PetroFund. It reimburses for those cleanups. They tax that by putting 1 or 2 cents on the wholesale price of gasoline. That's an excise tax on a means of propulsion. It's not much on a yearly basis. 1 penny of gas tax generally nets about $30 million a year to the Highway User Trust Fund. 1 penny equals $30 million. That's why if you're going to replace 240, that's 8 cents.
Right.
The PCA, however, has taken $500 million over the last 30 years to do PetroFund. since we have a surplus, I advocate they should reimburse the Highway User Trust Fund that $500 million they have unconstitutionally swindled over the last 35 years.
Why not?
Why not?
The getting back to the gas tax a little bit, and then I do want to move on because I'm interested in a couple of transit projects.
Oh, okay.
But with the gas tax itself, then once it does hit that 20% and then hits obviously the rate of inflation.
Yes.
Let's say, and this is a reality I don't want to live in, but let's say Tim Walz gets reelected, lays out a new agenda. Big picture, where do you see this? Where do you see a complete elimination of gas or a decrease? It's a regret, and the reason I ask is it's a regressive tax.
Very much so.
The people who need gas are the ones using gas.
Right, and the people who drive the old, less fuel-efficient cars
the
ones that are having to pay more to fill up their gas tank.
So the end game, the end goal of this type of legislation is obviously to eliminate gasoline.
You tax something to reduce its use.
Yes. Will they? Do you foresee with the makeup of the legislature currently and the governor's office being what it is? Do you see them accomplishing that goal or getting close to it, or will we just bite the bullet and continually?
The Metrocrats their goal is to reduce car use. They want to put us on a road diet. They want to invest much more in transit. This is a first step. It is not the only step. Once they have increased the funding to roads and bridges, they will say, oh, they don't need as much. And so we can take some of that, the percentage of the motor vehicle sales tax, and put it to transit. They are proposing some modest transit tax increases. Any increase in the 0.3% increase in the motor vehicle sales tax, 40% of that goes to transit. So that's getting up there. We have some proposed bonding to help the D-line bus rapid transit, which in South Minneapolis goes up Chicago Avenue and then goes up into Fremont and Emerson in North Minneapolis. But that's actually a very cost-effective and a good transit. The first one was the A-line, which was from Rosedale down Snelling Avenue and then over 46th Street to hook up with the Hiawatha line. You instead of spending $2 billion, you spend $20 million for some good stations, better buses, increased service. It's being used. That kind of bus rapid transit, rather than building one on its own right-of-way, like the Gold Line is being proposed for $500 million or more out in the eastern part, or building a $2 billion Southwest light rail line, or a $2 billion Riverview modern streetcar.
Right.
BRTs, and he's calling for additional more these arterial bus rapid transit. That's a good investment. He's also doing a modest $11 million to keep the MnDOT Office of Passenger Rail going, which means they can keep studying the Northern Lights Express to Duluth, or an additional moderate speed train to Chicago, another Amtrak to Chicago, but nothing major.
I think it's an important clarification. This is the Republican Roundtable. We're both Republicans. Right. To make for our audience to say that we're not necessarily against public transportation or allocating, funds to do it, but it's apparent that these transit projects are not meeting an appropriate ROI. Go into that a little bit, because we're not making any money on any of these projects, right?
No rail project, one, has ever recouped a penny of their capital cost, and they run. And all of them run an operating deficit. Let's take the commuter rail. North Star, in the country.
Think about that, by the way. Think about that. In the country, there's not a positive return on investment on
the North Star commuter rail. The public subsidy, when a passenger gets on in Big Lake, it's $20 of he takes $20 out of a taxpayer's wallet. And when he gets back on in Minneapolis, that's another $20. That's the subsidy. His ticket does not cover just the operating cost, the track, maintenance, or not even that, the engine, the conductor, the
Could you imagine a $40 ticket? That's
well, plus maybe he has a $5, $10 ticket now, and then another $40 on top of it.
Yeah.
Is he going to that, or is he going to
$50 a day for
not a chance?
No way. No way.
And that's it's a little less on light rail. Maybe it's only $7, $8, a ride, but buses do not. All public transit is subsidized to some degree. Mm-hmm. There's actually one proposal that I agree with in Governor Walz's budget, and he is going to take Metro Mobility off of the Metro Transit budget and put it on as a general fund line item. Metro Mobility is what our disabled people call when they need to go somewhere, so it's a point-to-point bus service with the lifts and the support to get them where they need to go. That's one of the biggest subsidies in the bus system right now. He's going to take that off of right now our property taxes are paying for that. He's going to make that general fund. That's going to make the Metro Transit bus system work a little bit better by giving them a little more money with the auto sales tax. They're going to do a little bit more. An interesting one is right now that 40% of the auto sales tax that they get, currently 36 goes to the metro area, and 4% goes to transit in greater Minnesota.
Okay.
That's about an 89-11% split.
It's very dramatic.
There was a reporter who was writing for public radio that said, well, it's going to be about 10%. He's proposing about 10%. Well, is that poor reporting, who's that reporter not doing his math, or is the governor's proposal actually to take a 1.1% away from greater Minnesota Transit and give it to Metro Transit? That is something the legislature will need to ask questions on, because I can't tell from looking at if that is actually a proposal or not.
Since last time we talked, Southwest Light Rail, you brought it up.
Yep.
There had been this, it seemed to me like back and forth, because the way that I understood it, you had federal money that was in limbo, and then it's gone, and then the Met Council found $2 billion magical dollars to illustrate that for me. What happened with Southwest Light Rail?
Southwest Light Rail has cleared just about all of its hurdles except for the federal money, the full funding grant agreement from the Federal Transit Association, or Administration Association. It's in the New Starts program, and President Trump has, in his last two introduced budgets, proposed eliminating the New Starts program, so that money wouldn't be there. Congress and its continuing resolutions have kept it going. So right now, Met Transit does not know whether Southwest Light Rail will get its slightly less than $1 billion. About
I said $2 billion, less than that.
Supposedly it's a 50-50 split. Some of those costs have to be borne by Met Transit, so they're trying to get $960 million from the federal government. They don't know if they're going to get it or not. They are hopeful. They try to put on a good face, but we do not know if the Trump administration will give that to them. However, Hennepin County is pot committed to Southwest Light Rail.
Yes.
They dissolved CTIB. They doubled the transit tax in Hennepin County, and Hennepin County, including our our property taxes and sales taxes and everything else, has the wherewithal to fund that $2 billion project on its own, and they've already sunk $250, $300 million into it. So that's what I'm saying is they're pot committed. If the federal money does not come through and they have to fund it all, that's not going to leave any money left over for the Botno line, which runs up northwest up into Brooklyn Park.
Okay.
If the federal money comes through, then they can use their other half to get some more federal money and fund Botno. So that's Southwest. Has cleared all of their environmental hurdles, has cleared their railroad agreements. Pretty much funding is the last piece of the puzzle.
And it's going to happen.
I think it's going to.
In your opinion?
In my opinion, Hennepin County is pot committed to Southwest. It will be built. whether they put their hand into our wallet that gives our federal our tax dollars, or they put the hand into the pocket that has our Hennepin County local tax dollars.
You're at the Capitol quite a bit on a separate issue. I'm wondering, Frank, within transportation itself, what else should we be thinking about? What else should we be aware of? What else are you hearing at the state capitol?
The single biggest thing is money and the budget. The other main issue in transportation is the banning of cell phones use,
Right.
unless you have hands-free. That had some early hearings, but that's still another major battle to fight.
You feel like that one is trending in a direction that it's going to get passed, or no?
Something is going to get passed. There's too much bipartisan support for that. I tend to favor Senator Osmick's approach, which if you have an accident and you are distracted, you increase the fine for distracted driving, rather than banning a cell phone use and at the same time giving a get-out-of-jail-free card to anyone who has a hands-free device on their cell phone. Under the bill that wants to encourage hands-free, they're basically saying you can't be charged with distracted driving if you have a hands-free device, even if you drove distractedly.
Okay.
So I'm worried about that one. Like I say, I prefer Senator Osmick's approach.
Sure.
Seems to be more support for the more draconian response to this, and we will see what happens.
What else? Is there anything else that we should be aware of from a transportation standpoint? The budget, hands-free
Free
bill, gas tax.
And always be vigilant on a DFL effort to change the 60-40% from the motor vehicle sales tax.
Which it feels like they're gonna push for that in the near future.
Not
you would
this
say.
year, but watch out next year.
Just when you have the political cover. Frank, how can people find out more about you, the work that you're doing, and kind of stay in touch with your efforts?
The single biggest one is I am the Transportation Tsar on the Up and Adam podcast.
Yes.
It's upandadam.com. I have a weekly segment. Normally it's Transportation Thursdays, with hearings conflicting with our recordings. It's been Transportation Wednesdays the last couple of weeks.
Sure.
But you can go on to upandadamshow.com and look at the archive of recorded podcasts and look for me,
You can look Frank Pafko right up.
and I'll be giving updates on a weekly basis.
Frank, thank you so much for joining the Republican Roundtable.
Thank you, Max.
Good to see you.
Yep.
This has been the Republican Roundtable. I'm Max Reimer. Until next time.